I spent hours preparing for Boris Johnson breaking the rules. And I told him, because I went into the dressing room for Boris Johnson and to see Jeremy Corbyn. And I said to him, I don't want to be the news story here, but if you break the rules, I'm going to have you.
Am I right in thinking that you helped Boris Johnson prepare for the 2019 debates?
Yes.
And was there's tactic there? Was there any element of, so if part of what Rishi Sunak was, Nick was saying last time we spoke on this podcast, that one of Rishi Sunak's aims would be to sow doubts about Starmer. Was one of your tactical sort of aims was to get Mr. Johnson to sow doubts about Corbyn, references to his support for whoever it might be, Corbyn supporters would contest that. But what were your tactics there?
It was quite different for us because we were really in the position that the Labour team are in now. So a big tactic was just to
Look solid
and do as few debates as possible with Johnson, to be honest, because his only downside.
Well, you set the precedent the way you did two.
Yeah.
Julie Etchingham did one on ITV, I chaired the other one on the BBC, and it's the same this time. Sophie Rayworth's going to be doing the BBC one on June the 26th.
Yeah, and people were saying, oh, he must do the Andrew Neil interview.
Why?
Because that's only bad for us. He's just going to be asked again and again how many kids he has, and it doesn't really help. I think there wasn't such a need to distance himself from Corbyn or sow doubts about Corbyn because a lot of that was already there.
He did throw out, was checking back yesterday, support for the IRA. It was nothing like as aggressive as Rishi Sunak. He was actually, bizarrely, Boris Johnson was on best behaviour.
And I think that's an important point.
He ceded those sort of doubts.
And I think that's, shall we say, a personal flair that he has. But I think the crucial bit is how he came across, and he needed to look prime ministerial, not kind of blustering and fun and jocular. And so you can do a little bit of that, but he was under strict instructions not to interrupt.
It's really interesting you say that because I was obviously on the other side. And I hinted at this when we talked on Monday. I spent hours preparing for Boris Johnson taking the piss, for Boris Johnson breaking the rules. And I told him, because I went into the dressing room for Boris Johnson and to see Jeremy Corbyn. And I said to him, I don't want to be the news story here, but if you break the rules, I'm going to have you. And I actually held a card up. And I said, on this card, Dominic Cummings, by the way, was sort of lolling in the background.
You shock me.
I had a card with 5 put-down lines, pre-prepared, which escalated, got stronger and stronger.
So not just gentlemen, please.
Yes, not just gentlemen, please. And I showed him I got it. I told him there were 5 lines. I didn't obviously show him what they were. And I had rehearsed what I would do to shut him up. I now realise, actually, I made a terrible mistake, which is he wasn't intending to do it.
You had a muzzle on him.
Yeah. And in fact, Rishi Sunak did what I thought Boris Johnson might do. Think, I don't care about the rules. I've just got to land my blows.
Yeah.
I don't care even if people think I'm annoying. I just have to get some ideas out there.
Who played Nick Robinson in the debate prep?
It might have been Lee Kane as a doppelganger. I don't know, actually.
He's a very nice man, but he did play the chicken in a chicken suit for the Daily Mirror before he went into politics.
And he is also
the fact is that he's bald.
Yes.
Can we just address 2 points?
I think you mean, in the modern polite parlance of the day, he's follically challenged.
Can we? Yes.
Well, I think not needing the kind of frippery and frills of many other modern men.
But go back. Are you looking at me?
No, I don't mean
All of this speaks to something we've got to touch on briefly, which is the debate format. A lot of chat about whether or not giving people 45 seconds to talk about how they fix immigration works. Just a really important point I want people listening to this podcast to know is that was not Julie Etchingham's decision. It's not Julie Etchingham who says at the start, you only got 45 seconds. That's a result of protracted negotiations between ITN and the parties, and there'll be different negotiations with the BBC and the parties. So the BBC is going to follow some very different rules, I imagine.
Well, when I chaired the debate last time, and I understand this will be the case this time when Sophie Rayworth does the head-to-head debate on the BBC, we didn't have those short time limits for answers.
It was not good, was it?
Well, it makes it pacey. It moves the subjects
The
along.
parties love it because they can clip it.
It's
to social
clippable.
media, if it works. They were obviously more
Does it?
comfortable
There are
with
reasons
it.
for-
I feel very strongly that on the behalf of voters, if you want enlightenment about different positions, clipped up, social media friendly. Look at you, pompous.
No, you're
salty.
right. You're right.
Look at
you're
you.
Right.
This
I'm
instinctive
doing a
laughter.
podcast with John Reith.
This
here.
instinctive. You are doing a podcast with John Reith. This instinctive laughter is this is state capture going on. If you are there, there's 4.8 million people watched it, down 2 million from last time. If you're there because you genuinely find out about politics, 45-second sound bites is not conducive to understanding.
No, well, that's why we didn't have them, and we're not going to have them on the BBC. I mean, I insisted when I chaired that debate that I had to have. It was like a Ferrari. I had 4 dials inserted into my lectern. I had a running total at the bottom, 2 clocks. One for how much total time Boris Johnson had taken, the other for the total time that Jeremy Corbyn had taken. And then I had 2 other clocks, which was how long they'd taken on that subject. And I used it as a guide that I never referred to. I don't think I referred to it anyway. But I did, it's Mr. Corbyn's turn. It's Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, let Mr. Corbyn speak. So it was my way of keeping an eye so that if someone was clock watching in the parties or, in a newspaper looking for bias, I knew that I had given each individual a fair shout. I thought that was a kind of more elegant way of doing it, but I confessed on the podcast on Monday, it didn't make for a terribly exciting watch. And it's always the case, I'm afraid. That's the nature of television, which is, people say, wouldn't it be better to have a grown-up conversation? Then we have a grown-up conversation. That was a bit of a yawn, wasn't it?
Well, also, I mean, the trouble is, you're right. The 45 seconds will have been down to negotiations, which the parties eventually agreed to. And the obvious answer is we want stuff we can clip for social media. And that, what was it, 4.7 million people 4.8 million
Average.
people tuned in. But how many people are now watching clips of it on TikTok and Twitter and all the rest of it? And I think it's the kind of spin-off audience that the parties will presumably have focused a lot of their time and energy on. And you saw it immediately. Like the minute that debate was over, with their key lines, £2,000 tax increase, Tory lies, whoosh, off they go.